Who should tell African story? That might sound outrageous as a kind of question that somebody should ask. Somebody like me, for example, who is an African, and maybe I pose such a question. Well, that is a question somebody asked today in our audio room event where we talk about storytelling. Because today we talk about something that I consider important, the argument of owning your story, which is a course that we recently co-created with other people. So today we were sort of presenting the discussion to the public. So somebody asked the question, who should tell African story? Well, I think that is an important question if you ask me, because of course the question is coming from the background of what have happened, background of an experience of what have happened be the case if you are cognizant of the reality of Africa, in that for some strange reason, many African people see the reality through the lens of other people or through the lenses of other people. It is outrageous, in fact. I think a lot of Africans should be angry about that. But be angry necessarily, not that they should be angry with other people. I want to say they should be angry with themselves. So actually, we should be angry with ourselves that we are not the one championing our history, our story. All the textbook talking about Africa should have African names as the author. That is essentially what it should be. Because when you look at other people with whom we are coexisting in the world, you look at maybe the Arabs, you look at maybe the Chinese, you look at maybe the Japanese, you look at the Europeans, you look at the Americans. They are the owner of their story. And story is powerful in that it is not something that you just give to other people and say, whoever is interested should carry on this job. You see, it cannot be like that. Story have a lot of emotion to it. For this reason, the story of Africans, or the African story, as it were, should be told by the African people. But why is that not the case? I was saying during the room that sometimes we don't pay attention to the intricacies of this argument, in that we are product of our education. The kind of education that we are given in Africa make it such that we do not even see ourselves as an actor in our own film. We believe that we need to regurgitate the idea of other people, which is wrong, completely wrong, but that is the way it is. Many curriculums in Africa are not actually designed by the African people and are not designed to resolve the African problem. Then you look around and ask yourself, why is it that a lot of Africans, youth particularly the younger people, are running away from the continent? Because that is how the system was set up. So who should tell the African story? Well, the questions, even though it is self-explanatory as it were, it is important, I want to repeat again, because that question is coming from the background of what is the reality among Africans today. That sometimes some Africans believe that they are not the actor in their own film. Because if they are, we should be the one telling our story. It is our story. When the story of Africa is written, or by extension the story of Africans are written, that should be you, should be I, we, us. It should not be written like they, how the African people behave, the culture of the African people. Because if that is what you are reading, of course, it tells you that you are not the writer of that story. When the Italians take up their book, their history to write, to read, they talk about us. We are involved. It is our story. So when you read African story, is that what you often see in it? About us, our fathers, our founding father, our culture, how it has been evolving for a long time. So who should tell the African story? Of course, it is the African people. African people need to tell the African story. And they need to tell it from the point of view of emotion. How do you feel? How do you feel about the situation that you are going through? You should be free to talk about how you feel about the situation that you are going through, what your ancestors went through, what the people like you went through. That story needs to be told from the point of view of what you went through as a people. And it can never be told by another person. If you see any other person talking about African story, other than the African people, we need to be suspicious of such individual. We as Africans really need to be suspicious of any other person other than the African people that is pretending to be an expert of the African history. Because history, as was said by Dr. Ben, is not just data. We're not just talking of telling me 20%, 10% of 500 people or 200 people. We are talking about emotion. We're talking about the feeling of the people. You cannot do that when you are from the outside. You need to do it when you are from the inside. It requires a lot to talk about history, to talk about story. This is why people other than the African people cannot tell the African story. It's not just a question of discipline. Because you now learn about story, you become expert of African story. The Europeans are the expert of European history because it is their story. You are a European, so you should tell your European story. It is your history. You should report that history from the point of view of you, which is it's going to be we are our fathers. That is story. That is because story or history are two words. His story, which basically explain that when you are talking of story, you are essentially talking about point of view. How do you see it? If that is the case, how can a European be the one telling African story? They are basically saying this is how they see it. That is not the African story. That is the European story of Africa. So if Africans did not tell their story to sort of counterbalance that, then we are in trouble. Who should tell the African story? These are the African people. You, the African people, you are the one to tell your story. Owning your story. Because your story is fundamentally important that you own it. It is crucial that you own your story. Tell your story. And learn how to profit also from it, because you can transform your story into different things that you can then sell to other people. It is your story. Who are to tell the African story? The African people. And who are to profit from that same story? The African people. Because it is their story. It is our story. That story needs to be written, I want to repeat again, from the point of view of us, the first person's narrative. Because it is our story. We should be the one telling our story. What we feel about the world. What is our understanding of the world? This is how it should be. The African story. It is called the African story because it's about the African people. So the African people should be the one telling the story. If you're an African person, then this is your story to tell. Make sure you are the one telling your story because it is your story. So the African story should be told by the African people. And we should tell it from the point of view of our emotion, from what we feel, from what we see about this story. That is our story, and we should be the one telling that story.